when Baba asked if I was willing to pay the price, the first thing that flashed through my mind, I mean, after seeing myself burning at the stake, which is, believe it or not, one of the things that flashed in my mind, because I was thinking the price is to be consumed. But actually, I knew it was the ego. The price for becoming one with Baba and the universe and just everything that exists was my own self, the ego, the sense of separateness. Ego as the sense of separateness. And when those walls would come tumbling down, then I would automatically be one with Baba, and I would realize God, I would experience God. So I knew that, but this is not the same as experiencing it. And I felt that here now, Baba is sitting right here next to me, and he was capable of giving that experience of, you know, removing whatever the barriers were. That's what happened. Baba didn't say anything further about it. And I did know what he meant, you know, at least I thought I did. You know, I knew what he meant. So there was quite a few things that happened. You see, Baba, I rode in the car with Baba to various places, and it was always, it was like my time, you know, my opportunity to be with him. That was particularly brought out when Baba just walked around the car, as I mentioned the other day, and made sure that I was able to sit next to him by him just simply coming and sitting next to me that way. Erich, the car was usually full, and there was usually a whole troop of cars. You know, there was a lot of people that were coming along with Baba. Next question.
Could you elaborate a little bit about your father and also your second trip to India?
Yes. It was always an adventure going to India because of my father's resistance to our going. And I always wanted to tell him, and somehow I would, you know, I mean, he would always know. There's no doubt, even if it was after the trip was made. But the second time, I asked my dad, you see, what happened was that there was a family letter that had come. In those days, as you know, Fred and Ella sent out these family letters. We got a letter which said in it that Baba would be seeing his lovers over a 2-week period, and that though that it was not particularly for Westerners, it was mainly for Easterners, and that Baba would see those who came for 1 hour only on any one day of the 2 weeks. And therefore, he said, because the time limit was so short, that Westerners should not feel that they should come due to a number of things. Then he also gave specific orders or directions, in which he said you shouldn't come if it interfered with family harmony, you shouldn't come if it interfered with your job, and you shouldn't come if it interfered with your finances. So, and it wasn't, as I say, particularly for Westerners, he said shouldn't, but he didn't say a Westerner couldn't come, just that it wasn't really necessary for Westerner to come. Well, we happened to get this letter in the middle of the second week that this gathering was already taking place, when he was even seeing anyone. And as soon as I got it, my brother and I looked it over, and we didn't even know if we could make it for the last day. even if we could overcome somehow all the objections to coming that Baba had presented for everybody. So we just looked it over and thought, well, let's first find out from a travel agent if it's possible even to get there. Because we had been saving all along, for just such a thing, to get to see Baba. That's what we were doing the whole year. And we were, if there was any way to go, we were going to do it. So the travel agent says, well, yeah, you might be able to make it for that day, providing that there's no hitch and everything goes perfect. And I know that things don't usually go perfect. But anyhow, that's what he said. Then we had to take the instructions that Baba had given, in which he said it wasn't particularly for Westerners. Well, that was easy. He didn't say a Westerner couldn't go, so that was down, strike one. Then he said that if it interfered with family harmony, and we already knew how my father felt about all of this. So we thought about it and said, well, what's there to interfere with? There's no family harmony anyhow. And if there's going to be any, it'll have to come through Baba's good graces. So this certainly won't interfere with it. I said that if there was going to be any family harmony, it would have to come through Baba's good graces. So obviously, this was the best thing we could do. Secondly, if it interfered with your job. Well, of course, I was working with my dad at the time as well, and he didn't want me to leave the job to go anywhere aside from everything else. And Ed and I again thought about that, and he said, well, so I said to my brother, I said, what is our job on earth? What is our job on earth? Isn't it to know God and to get closer to God? So how can it interfere with it? Does anyone know? How can it interfere with it? So there was no interference there. It's not exactly how my dad would have looked at it, but that's how we saw it. Now, the third thing was, let's see, finances. Well, we had been saving up. We had the money to go, but of course, going meant that when we got back, we'd be completely broke. That's it. We would have used everything, and that's it. And I suppose normally people don't do that, to just go down to the last penny that they have. But then again, we've thought about it again. I said, well, what is money for? If it isn't where it can help you in your own advancement, in your enlightenment, in your gaining the goals of your life, then what are you going to do with the stuff? And that's, we thought, well, getting closer to Baba, getting closer to God is going to be the best thing that ever happened to us. And with that, he said, now the die is cast. We're ready to roll. And we began the process of getting the tickets and everything. Now, there was another thing. I did want to tell my father, though. I really did. Because I felt it would be a good thing if he could be somewhat agreeable, even if he wasn't going to be totally supportive. So, but I had to be very careful because I didn't want him calling the police on us again. So I said that night at dinner, because we had just gotten this letter, I said that I just thought I'd just feel it out a little bit, see how he feels about things. I said, Dad, I'd like to know how you feel that if someday I was to go again to India to see Meherabad, if you would mind that, if you would, how you would feel about it. So he says, well, son, I'm very happy that you taking me into your confidence to ask me my advice, because you don't usually do that. So I'd like to tell you that that would be a big mistake. So I said, well, Dad, even if it was a big mistake and you feel that way, would you do anything like you did last time to call the police or to try and stop me if I wanted to make such a trip? And he said, oh, of course, I'd have to do that. I said, well, what would you do? He said, I'd probably have you declared incompetent and put you away in a mental institution. So I said, well, Dad, thanks for letting me know how you feel about it. And I couldn't see any way I could possibly tell him anything, because now time was so short that there was no time even for fooling around about this at all. And if I was going to get to Baba, we're going to have to do it without him knowing anything. So I said, so then he asked me, he said, oh, by the way, what do you plan to do? Are you planning a trip? Are you planning to do something? You see, he's quite sharp. And I said, well, Dad, you'll certainly be the first to know. So with that, I just sort of let it go, and he didn't question any more about it. But I did tell him, oh, by the way, this weekend I'm going to be visiting a friend, so I won't be here. My friend in India, Meherabad. But I didn't tell him that part. Now, this time we left, and Edward actually left first. That very night, he took a plane to New York, because we had to get our papers and visas and, all of the things that you need. And I had to be there to get the tickets, because everything took a little time. And I told him I'd just meet him at the airport in New York. So Edward, I knew, was not, he has never done these things with papers and documents, and it wasn't his kind of thing. But we just took Baba's name and said, well, he's going, and that's all. Baba will have to guide it. And what happens, I get to New York, I fly in. Now, nobody knows that I'm gone. This is a real secret. And I get to the airport where I'm supposed to meet him. And what happens, they're announcing on the speaker system, Air India flight is leaving for Bombay. All passengers should now board the plane. Like that. And Edward isn't there. I'm waiting there. I got the baggage and whatnot. And again, after a while, there's a second announcement. This is the second announcement. Air India flight is boarding, and all passengers should go to the gate and board the flight. And he's still not there. And I'm thinking, Baba, this is it. I am not even... Here I've gone ahead and I've withdrawn all the funds. I've gotten the tickets. I've made the escape. And everything is all ready to go. And if he doesn't show up with the documents, I'm not going anywhere. And he couldn't go anywhere because he needed the tickets. We really needed each other this time. It was really something. So a while goes by. Third announcement. This is the final announcement. Air India flight is now boarding. Final announcement. All passengers, please board. Flight will be leaving. And I thought, well, Baba, I've done all I can. And with that, what do I see? This fellow is going like this. He is running down the... And there's my brother coming, oldest. He's racing down with his bags, And he comes up and he says, do you have the tickets? I said, yeah. Do you have the passports? Yeah. Let's go. And we went. Well, now we're on the flight, right? And we're about, 30,000 feet. And it suddenly dawns on me. what if I didn't quite interpret this correctly? What if I really didn't? Maybe I read all my own thoughts into Baba's orders, and what if it wasn't right? What if I was just rationalizing everything, and Baba really didn't want anyone to come, and he's speaking of a regular job, and he's talking about the type of family harmony that people normally think of, and all of this, all these thoughts are going through my mind now. And I'm at 30,000 feet, and the only thing you can do now is bail out. I'm not bailing out anywhere. But this went through my mind, and I said, nope, I can't think like that. I'm going to go with it. And so we continued on. Now comes the arrival into Pune. And we had sent a cable on ahead saying about our coming. And I remember that it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the car that drove us to Pune takes us to the hotel where we were supposed to be staying. And that's where Baba's men was going to come and pick us up to take us to see Baba. So we get there, and it's about 4 o'clock. And just as our car is pulling in, Baba's, I think it was Meherabad, car pulls in too, to take the group of people that had come for Baba, to bring them to Baba. And I see that this, there's hardly anybody. There was maybe about 4 or 5 people that had actually come to see Baba. And this is in 1961. As a result, no doubt, of these orders that Baba gave. But there were hundreds of Easterners that came. But amongst the Westerners, there was just less. It was about a handful. That was it. I think Dr. Kenmore was there, Harry Kenmore. There was... Fred Winterfeld had come, me and my brother, and I think there was one other person that came, Ann Conley. Some of you know them.
Was this Ed's first trip?
And that was my brother's first trip now. So Edward was really there this time. So we're driven over to where Baba is, and we had just made it. We had you couldn't have cut it any closer. Just made it. And we come in, and there's this line of people, and as we're coming into Guruprasad Hall, the whole atmosphere changes, and you can just feel this very beautiful and very warm. It was like there was so much love in the room. And it was just like wading into it, you might say, like that. And you could tell Baba's presence was there. So came my turn, and I walked up to Baba, and Baba embraced me again. And this time I kissed him on his cheek when we embraced. And then we sat next to him. Baba had me and my brother sit near him. And there was about 200 people in the room at the time. So one of the things that Baba asked, he said, he asked me again, how did you come? And I went on to tell him about this whole story about, the stuff that happened, how I got there. And Baba didn't say a thing, he just listened and then just went on with what he was doing. And I thought, I really made a big mistake. Because the year before, when he asked me how I came, I said it was his will. And this time, I told him all the technicalities of coming, which wasn't the point at all. And so there was no comment from the avatar on that one. But I did realize, I thought, I made a mistake this time. I said the wrong thing. But then Baba, I remember he said that I should, at one point he called me up to him and had me stand next to him on one side, and he had my brother stand next to him on the other side. And this time, he started to go on and say that these are the Luck brothers. They've come and they've crossed the oceans to be with me today. And they they had many obstacles to overcome to be here with me. And Baba went on to really praise us very highly over that. And he said, such love must be rewarded. And he kept repeating that, such love must be rewarded. And he was saying how we had come such a distance and how much it was difficult and so on like that. So I was thinking at the time, I'm not looking for any reward. As I was standing there, I was saying, I'm not looking for rewards. I'm just looking to know him as he really is. That's the most important thing for me. And with that, Baba had us then sit down next to him again. Well, that really did confirm in my mind, though, that we had made the right decision. That was the right decision, you know. We didn't make a mistake in coming there. There was a lot of other things that happened during that little visit. That visit was only for 1 hour. Actually, it lasted 2 hours because Baba allowed you to stay for 1 hour. But he kept everybody there for 2 hours, and it was very powerful. At the end of that particular time period, we were all leaving, and I didn't really want to leave so much. You know, I wanted to really stay with Baba if I could. But as we were going out the door, and everyone had already left, Baba said something very, very incredible. And he pointed to us as we were going out the door. Actually, the room was, I'd say about as big as this room, up to this wall here, and to that wall there, and as far back as what this wall back there is. That's about as big as Guruprasad Hall was. It was a big room. And Baba was seated on his dais, you know, on the couch. Actually, there was a couch. Well, that's not so relevant. But when he was, so we were at the door now, we were at the back door, and Baba pointed to us and he said, one day I will give you the highest experience. Through his gestures, Erich was reading his, and he would go like this, one day I will give you the highest experience. And he went like that 4 times, and he repeated it twice. And when he said that, I was so overcome to remain. I really wanted to be there with him. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, today is a good day too. You know, I didn't say it. I wasn't going to make any comment there. But just the same, he would say that. So when that time comes, that'll be very nice, you see. I'm looking forward to it. Any questions?
You say much about your brother. How did he react to all this?
Well, my brother Edward was very much moved and touched by the whole experience. It was his first time to be with Baba, and he felt that Baba really understood him, and he felt that Baba's tenderness and the way of his love towards him was a great, you know, really moved him a great deal. There was no question as to who Baba is when we were there with him, but just the same, he was really moved. That was my brother.
What was your father's response to that?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. You know, that reminds me. Baba had at one point asked if our father knew that we had come. And I said, no, Baba, and Baba just went like this. Because it meant a lot of work for Baba. He was going to have to do a whole lot of things. But when we got back, you see, we didn't go straight back to our dad's place because we had left without saying anything to him. Instead, we got our own apartment, but you see, what happened was, my father then, within a few days, he came over to where we were staying, and he said to me, he says, "You did the wrong thing. You didn't tell me." I said, "Well, Dad, I didn't tell you because you had threatened that you were going to put us in a mental hospital." And he says, "And you also," he says, "but I didn't come here to argue with you. I want you to come back and work for me, and you can live with us also if you want." I said, "Well, that's all right, but I think I need a raise because you've been paying me $35 a week." He said, "Well, how much do you want at that time?" So I said, $100 after tax. And he said, "Okay." So as a result, I even got a raise. How do you like that?
Well, he did a lot of work.
He did a lot of work. And, you know, that's really where it ended. So it ended up where I not only got to go and see Baba, you know, having taken the risk for the chance that everything would somehow work out, but also it turned out good in very good in other ways. I really ought to tell you this thing, though, because my father has been made out, because of the time period that I'm talking about, to have been a pretty bad guy, you know, standing in our way to get to see Baba. But actually, later on, some years later, he began to regret the fact that he never met Meherabad. This was after Baba dropped his body. And he not only regretted it, but he also had come to the conclusion that Baba was his best friend of all people. Because one day, I don't know why I asked him this, I just said, "Dad, would you say that Baba is your best friend?" And he says, "Well, I'll have to think about that." I was amazed that he even would think about it, but he said that. So I said, "All right." And then he told me the next day, he says, "You know, I've thought about what you asked." And he started listing his different friends, and each one, he'd list all the things wrong with them. And the next one he would go to, and all the things wrong with that friend, and the next one, all the things wrong with that friend. And finally, there wasn't anything right with anybody. But then he came to Meherabad, and he said, "Now, Meherabad, yes, Meherabad, he understands me." And that's what he said. So, and he had also written an incredible poem about Baba being his friend, and that to be guided by the hand of a master. I mean, it was really incredible, because at times he wrote the worst things. You can't imagine some of the stuff that he wrote to Baba about his sons and about just what he felt about the whole thing and all of that. And now for him to make a turn like this. Now he also, he also told me that Baba had appeared to him a few times. And the way it started off was one day he just started off by telling me, he says, "You know, something happened and you're not going to believe it." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He says, "I can't tell you because you won't believe it." So I said, "Well, Dad, you know, you can always see if I believe it or not." He says, "No," and this went on for quite a while. He would not tell me. He only wanted to tell me that something incredible happened, but I wouldn't believe it. Well, it turned out that Baba had appeared to him. And the way it happened was in his living room. Baba was sitting, my father was sitting in his chair, and he was reading his newspaper. And all of a sudden, he looked up, and he sees Baba standing there, full length. I said, was it really full length? Yes, full length. And he was wearing his white sadra, his white gown. And he had two disciples with him, and he motioned they should just sit down. And then he started to speak to me. This is what my father is saying. Baba started to speak to me in his own voice. And he had a very sweet, ringing voice. And he says, I know how Baba's voice sounds, and you don't. Because to you he was silent, but he spoke to me. And then he said, that Baba told him that not to be surprised that he hears him speak, because where he is now, he can speak. And then he told him a whole lot of other things, and then he said at the end, he said, I will come to you 3 times, I will visit you 3 times, and the 3rd time will be the last. And actually over the next, I think, couple of years, he told me about the other 2 times that Baba came to him. And one time he said he was so depressed, it was... my brother Richard was getting married, and something happened, and my father was going to pay for this, that, and help with this and that. And then he changed his mind, and everything went topsy-turvy. And he was upset, and everything was upset. And he was very depressed about the whole thing. So what happened is that that night, he was in a very bad mood, and he was thinking about things, and he said it was late at night, and all of a sudden, he said, his feelings began to change, and he felt a hand on his shoulder, and he turned and he saw that there was Baba standing behind him. And he said that when Baba came in, it was just like heaven had walked into the room. And everything just evaporated, all of this evaporated. And Baba, in the course of whatever transpired, told him that he should go ahead with his original plan, everything would be all right. And the next day, he calls up my brother and he says he's changed his mind about everything, and he's going to go and help them with this and that and the other, and to go on with the wedding. And then Baba came to him, you see, came to his rescue again. So these things have happened.
And the third? The third vision?
Well, the third vision, I don't recall so much what happened. I'll try and remember that.
Was your father aware of your mother seeing Baba when he was driving? Did they ever talk about Baba? Do you know?
I don't really think so, because my mother was not inclined to talk to my father about that. My father was already struggling with the fact that he had 2 sons that were so much following Baba. He would call us Baba fanatics, So for my mother to be saying anything would have been a real killer. And so she didn't, she just wouldn't say anything. But something did happen, and this happened about a year ago. My mother had become, she was about, right now she's about 84, and he's 88, but this was actually a few years ago, a couple of years ago, she was in the bedroom, I remember, and she was getting ready to lie down, and she wanted to rest, and when she would lie down and rest, nobody could move her. So, and she was not carrying anything, anyhow, whatever my father would think or what. I mean, she was very sweet, but, whatever she wanted to do, she just did it. It was not like the old days. And I remember, my father wasn't in the room, but I asked her, I said, Mother, do you ever think about Meherabad? Because it's been a long time since I asked her about that. And she says, oh, yes, of course I do. she says. And then all of a sudden she just lights up like a light. And just then my dad walks in. And she says, I love Meher Baba more than you, more than, and she points to my father, more than anybody. He is number one. And she was just absolutely radiant when she said it. She was just, I mean, nobody could say a word, and my father was very quiet. You know, he didn't, he just, listen. That was it. So that was a real statement. You know, that was a real statement.
Irwin, last night, Jeff introduced you in the illustrious manner that you and your brother had been nicknamed by Bob as Divine Idiots. And I imagine there must be a story that goes with that. Share that with us.
It happened that on that second visit, my second visit, my brother's first, Baba, again, we were sitting near Baba, and he just turned and he started to gesture like this, you know. Erich read Baba's gestures and he said, you are divine idiots. That's what Baba's reading. So I heard it and I thought, what is Erich saying? It doesn't sound right, you know. And then, he says, yes, Baba is saying that you are divine idiots. And I said, well, I'm thinking, well, that's for real. He really did say it. And Baba didn't explain anything. It was just said at that moment. And afterwards, after a little while, I asked Erich. Mind you, I'm asking Erich. Baba is sitting right there. And quietly, I'm asking Erich, who's also on the side here. Because, you know, there were other things going on, so it looked like Baba was occupied. I said, what does Baba mean by divine idiot? He says, well, if you want God, you have to be mad. You have to be mad after God. You know, so in the spiritual sense, you have to be a divine idiot. If you really, because the world will think you're mad. The world doesn't want God. So there may be a lot of divine idiots. But anyhow, that's what happened. That's how it came about.
Owen, I think the story of how you came to write this book and give it to Bob. Would you tell us the story of that? I think it's rather interesting.
This book here, The Silent Master, Meherabad. I was living with John Bass in his apartment at the time, and
This is what you're...
this was, I guess, around 1967. And John was an old disciple of Baba who met him when Baba first came to America in 1932 at Harmon on the Hudson. That was when the first original Western disciples, I think Margaret Krask and others, first met Baba. So John would love to tell the stories in the morning about his meetings with Baba and this and that and the other. Anyhow, one day I got the idea to put together a collection of pictures and Baba's sayings that contain the most important highlights in Meher Baba's life. And so I started work on that. No one asked me to do it. Baba hadn't asked me to do it. I just felt inspired to do it. So I started to do that. And after about 6 months, this one copy of this book, there was one and only one copy, was finished. And it was actually a paste-up which looked exactly like this, because this book was really the exact replica copy of the original book that was put together, you know, at the time and it had all the pictures and sayings of Baba. It was the best ones that I could find. And also certain messages and discourses that Baba had given that were the highlights of his life. It was, to me, like the composite of everything I've known about Baba. Well, this book got finished, this one and only book, and I sent it to Baba because it was his book. It was his book about his life. And it was received by Baba on Silence Day, on the anniversary of his 67th year of silence. And Baba received it, and he was very happy about this book. And he wrote me back some letters that were just quite incredible, how pleased he was. It was for posterity. It was for the archives. It was just so many things he said about it. So I thought, well, that's, great. But Baba never said for a second that he wanted this book printed or that he wanted this book published. And so he kept it. And that book was kept by Baba in his hand there at Meherabad for 20 years. After 20 years, Erich, when I was visiting India, said to me, remember the book that you had put together, compiled about Baba? And I said, yes, of course I remember that. He says, would you take it back and see if it could be published, if it could be printed so it could be made available for everyone? And I said, well, it's going to be quite expensive. Let me see. I suppose I could do it. We'll figure out a way. We'll do it. And so what happened, that book did come out, this book, which is the book now that you see, came out at the time when this movie, Avatar of the Age, Meherabad, Avatar of the Age, was released. And actually, this book turned out to be the research, much of the research that was done for all of the words that were used in that film. Because every word in the film is Baba's own word. It's put up against the picture. So 20 years earlier, Baba had already foreseen that. And what happened is, and also the photos in the book, without having any deliberation on it, it turned out to be many of the same pictures that were used in the film. So it actually turns out to be really a book that's the handmaiden of the movie, because everything is so close together in it. And when the film was first released, it was released with this book at the same time. This book came out at the same time that film did. And it'll always be a part of that movie, where people can take it home and look at it like that. So it only showed me that Baba, 20 years earlier, was already setting up what was going to be 20 years later. And that's what happened.
That's neat. Would you be kind enough to autograph that for whoever wants? I know a number of people have bought it already. It'd be nice if you could.
Okay, sure. Afterwards, yeah.
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 Oh, you're talking the other day about Dr. Deshmukh.
Uh-huh.
If you could just talk more about what he was like as a character, as a person.
Well, Dr. Deshmukh was a very intellectual man. He had a string of degrees in front of his name that if you could take the time to go through all those degrees, you would probably not get to his name. So they had to drop them off and just use a few of them. But Baba always loved, it seems, to make fun of Deshmukh and humiliate him. But Deshmukh had the kind of mind that didn't at all get bothered by that. He was not bothered at all. There's that famous story of 7 tiles in which Deshmukh was asked well, Baba was throwing the ball at the 7 tiles, and the idea was to knock them all down. So it was Deshmukh's turn, and Deshmukh would throw the ball, and he'd miss. And then Baba said, all right, move up half the distance. And he'd throw the ball again, and he'd still miss. And Baba said, move up another half of the distance. And each time he had him moving up, and each time he'd miss, until he was practically standing on top of it trying to hit it, and he still couldn't hit it. And Baba went like this, that's it. And Deshmukh would have to, stand on the side. So, but you see, one thing that Deshmukh really served Baba very well. And aside from being the person that Baba chose to edit his discourses, which was no small thing, which reminds me now, because when I interviewed Deshmukh, he told me that when he was doing those discourses, it came through a compilation of notes that Baba would keep sending to him. And also he said he was having an incredible inner experience of what the meaning of all these messages, and so that he could compile. And being a very intellectual person, he had a good grip of the language so that he could express it. And so he wrote those discourses, which, Baba was the author of it, but he was the one that actually put it together and, for presentation. Now, Deshmukh also would get an idea in his mind, and he'd really stick with it. And one of the ideas that he had came one day when he asked Baba if he could go with him on a tour, to film the muss, because Baba never allowed anybody to film those muss, not with him or with, it was completely taboo. It was too intimate. It was not something he would permit. But because Deshmukh kept being persistent and saying that the world will one day want to see this, Baba, you just let me go one time. And so with it, Baba agreed. And that's how we have those films of Baba journeying to contact muss as a result of Deshmukh,
When was the last time you saw Baba?
The last time that I saw Baba was in 1962 at the East-West Gathering. We had a lot of correspondence with Baba right up till the time he dropped his body. But if you want to say the last time was at the time when he had dropped his body, because I was there to help cover Baba before he was covered. You could still see his face in the crypt portion of the tomb. And I had arrived on the last day, the 7th day that Baba had been opened, which is really quite remarkable that anyone would lie in state for 7 days like that in the heat of India, even in the tomb. And there was no odor and no decay or anything. The only reason Baba was covered that day is because Mehra felt that that's the day that he should be covered. And that was a result of something that Baba had told her when she asked him how much longer he would have to suffer. And it was the last day he was alive. He said, only 7 more days. So with that in mind, she said the 7th day, Baba should now be covered. And so it was. But that was the last time, and I helped to cover Baba. That was an incredible experience. It was so intoxicating to be there with Baba at that time. That was the most intoxicating time.
Irwin, those films that interviews connected to establishments.
Yeah.
Which was the most interesting of the interviews? One, and number 2, are you going to see those in film or something later on?
Yeah, I'm sure, of course. I think they were all, there was a lot of incredible stories One of them, I remember when Harry Kenmore and Adi and Merji were talking, and they were, the subject of ghosts came up, ghost stories with Baba. And because Baba had visited places where there were ghosts, and the things that happened were quite remarkable. So they were telling all these ghost stories, with Baba. One of them was in England when Baba had asked about some house that was supposed to have been haunted. And arrangements were made to go and stay overnight in the house, him and his disciples. And Baba had given instruction to his men that under no circumstances were they to go outside. So outside the building. So the night then proceeded, and there was always someone standing watch. And this person that was standing watch suddenly had the urge to go to the toilet outside, and he started to go out, and all of a sudden there was this ball of light that came straight at him. And just then Baba clapped his hands, and he turned around and came back, before this light came up to him. And later, the next day, Baba said that there was a very powerful spirit that inhabited these premises, and that he was very powerful. Had he come up to you with his intention, he would have killed you. But he said, because of me, I've come here to free him from this place. And after that, the news about that house, when people would try to feel the presence of that spirit, there were no more. They said that it didn't seem that ghost was there. This was one of the stories that they talked about. There was a lot of different ones. I found that was very interesting. I mean, there were so many stories, different types of stories.
Irwin?
Yeah.
Do you have any release play for that material?
I do. It'll be done probably after the other film comes out, the one that I'm working on for release now. It's a lot of work to do that. There'll be a lot of work because all of that material has to really be digitized and everything to make it available in a way that it won't deteriorate it, because it's old.
Is there interviews with the
Well, what he's referring to, see, I had traveled around the world after Baba dropped his body beginning in 1970. It started with Adi and Merji's tour to the West when they first came, and we traveled all around the country with them, filming them in all the different places that they had been, hearing all the stories, incredible stories that they were telling. And then I went to India the following year with a crew of 4 people, and we filmed all the disciples in the Mandali for 1 month solid, Meherabad, day and night. It was going on. And this was before they even told their stories to anybody yet. So everything was fresh. Also, there was a lot of them living then that aren't here today. So it was an incredibly good record of first-hand accounts of the stories of their lives with Baba, first-hand accounts. And then we traveled throughout Europe and all the European disciples, and later we went to Australia and did all of the Australians. And one thing about Australia, Baba had visited Australia twice, and the first time he was in Australia, he was really so loving and so sweet and so wonderful in the way that he was with all the people that came to see him. But the second time, he was there for business. He wanted to know who loved him, who would obey him, who would surrender their life to him. I mean, they were shocked because Baba came very strong that time. And now the romance was going to be there, but you had to do the real business of surrender to the beloved. And Baba said a lot of things about Australia. One of them was that he would give the Australians a culture. He would provide a culture for them. Then he said, and he, you know,
I love that.
he would provide.
I'll take exception to that remark.
Oh, well, you know, he told them so many things, and it's, you know, that's what all these films were about, because they were all first-hand accounts of all of the people. I went to Sydney, to Melbourne, to Brisbane, to Avatar's Abode. We interviewed Francis Brabazon, who had lived with Baba for 10 years, you know, every day. I mean, he had also incredible things. He was having some problems with memory, but when we were there, he remembered everything. Yeah, he really did. He didn't want to be interviewed, and I think it was mainly because he was having these problems, and he had gotten Alzheimer's or something. But Baba lifted it for the time that we were there, so that he could tell as much as he could. And it was a great visit, you know.
What about the movie, Irwin? How did that come about?
This film?
Yeah.
Well, in 1980, I had this roll of film which was deteriorating very rapidly. And it was the film that Deshmukh had made. Deshmukh had actually shown the original film so many times that it was all torn up. I mean, physically, that film was such a mess. It required a lot of reconstruction just to get the sprocketing and everything else, just so that it could even be copied. And I chose that film to start with because it was in such poor condition and needed to be saved. At the time, there was no thought to make a whole production out of it. It was just to copy it, you know, make a safety negative or something, just so it could continue to exist. And so that was the first step. But then in the process of doing that, it turned out that, you know, it was so beautiful. When I looked at certain scenes, I said, you know, we really got to do something more than just coming out with this as just a little patchwork of clips together. No doubt, I remember when Bill LePage had seen a copy of it at the time, he said that, how can you come out with a film like this? This is only about 10 minutes of it that's any good. So I said, well, Bill, you have no idea what we're doing with it. We're going to save the whole thing. And as it turned out, I mean, the end result was that from this 25-minute piece of footage that we had from what Deshmukh, you know, was salvaged from Deshmukh, there was an hour and 20-minute movie made from it. And to give you some idea of what was done, there's one scene, for instance, that you see Baba playing marbles. Remember that marble scene where he's shooting marbles? And he's saying how he plays marbles with the universe? Well, that scene in its original form would have been, you would never have seen it. It was only 10 frames long. And 10 frames means that when it goes through a projector at 24 frames a second, that's less than half a second. So obviously you can't use it. It would have been edited. So many scenes would have been edited. Bill would have been right if it was dealt with in a way that most films are. But what we ended up doing is turning that scene into about 45 seconds, which was in full motion. And it wasn't just freezing the frame, you know, and just letting it go for however long. This was in full motion of Baba shooting marbles. And it rescued probably one of the only shots anywhere of him doing that particular thing. And it gave time in the film for us, for Baba to say what he was doing, that he was shooting, that he would shoot marbles with the universe, and how he loves games, and various other things that he was saying about it at the time. So it made for time for dialogue, time for a person to think about what he's saying, and then for the music track to come through, and for a lot of things to happen which otherwise would have been impossible. There were other scenes where we had to make it look like it was being shot from many different views to add interest to the scene, when actually all he had was one camera. See, so these were parts of the way in which the film was presented. Also, the most important thing I would say about that movie, and what I was really after more than anything else, was that people should be able to see very clearly Baba's mood and his expression and the feeling of how he felt about what he was doing. And that's a very subtle thing, but it was very important. In the films of Baba that you have that didn't have that much, they didn't have that kind of work done on it, you miss about 75% of what is actually going on in the way of his expressions and the way of, a lot of other detail that's occurring. But you don't miss it in this, because it was made that you should see it. So that's part of the time that it took about 7 years, to do it. We weren't using computers then. It had to be all done on a special optical printer, and working on it day and night. I had 3 people helping me with it. It was quite a job.
How did your relationship change, or how did your change or stay the same after Baba dropped his body and seeing Baba, seeing his physical body?
Yeah. Well, when Baba dropped his body, I was very... it was almost like I felt, here now, what's the point? I had been centering my life to living it around Meherabad, and now if he wasn't going to be here to give us the instructions to do the things that he had been doing all along, there was really like, what's the point of my life? What's the point of going on? So, but at the same time, the fact that he did drop his body, I wanted to go straight to India to his samadhi. At the time, there was a lot of talk amongst the Baba, the group heads at that time, that people shouldn't go at that time. Nobody should go, because there would be too much of a disturbance and pressure on the mandali for a lot of people to be coming at that time. But when I heard them talking about this, I thought, this doesn't hold no water, because if a person is, if your father passes away, you want to be right there. You're not thinking how many, whether you're going to be a burden on somebody or not. You'll take care of yourself. So I thought, well, if that's what they want to say, they can say it, but it's not going to affect me. So I left to go and see, to go to Baba. I didn't know that his body was uncovered, that you could actually see his face at that time. The cable that came from India was that Avatar Meher Baba has dropped his physical body to live eternally in the hearts of his lovers everywhere. And he had been... and he has been interned in his tomb, which he had ordered to be built for him long ago. That's what the cable said. So my thought was that, well, Baba was placed in his tomb, and he's been covered, and now I'm just going to go there, and pay, just be there. But as it turned out, that wasn't the case at all. He hadn't been covered. And so I got to see him. that way. And we arrived at 11 o'clock on the 7th day. That was the last day. So once again, I arrived at the 11th hour. It was just made it right under the wire. And that was, powerful. That was a power. It was so intoxicating there. I had mentioned that even Harry Kenmore, who was a blind chiropractor, he kept saying, this is intoxicating. This is intoxicating. And he was right. It really was. But I felt, that's how I felt, what's that?
In conjunction with that, did you feel that, Bobby's presence was there even stronger if he wasn't gone for you?
His presence was very strong. That's why it was so intoxicating. It was so strong. And I didn't feel that I was missing his physical form. That was not what occurred to me so much. It was more because I never really came to him for his physical form. I came to know him as he really is. That was from the first day I ever saw Baba, went to see him. But that was the gateway, you see. And so I wasn't going to feel incredible loss about his form. In fact, one of the things I did think of earlier is that how slippery Baba was. Here he went ahead and he had arranged for this incredible gathering for all these people to come, and then he drops his body and leaves his body. But he had given a lot of indications. He said he would be very strong, that when Dr. Goher asked Baba, how can you give darshan when your physical strength is so low, Baba? How can you do this? And Baba just said, oh, you'll see, I'll be strong. If I give it reclining, I'll be resting like that. Will that be all right? And she says, yes, I think if you do it like that, and no one will be allowed to ask you questions. And Baba said, yes, that's right. No one will ask me questions. Like that. So they didn't know that he meant this.
Question.
Yeah. Just one moment.
Yeah, I want to hear your question. You just said that you came to Baba just to know Baba as who he is and so forth. My question is, how was it like when you met Baba in person for the first time or even second time? And what was the impact on your spiritual growth?
Well, the first time that I met Baba, my first impression was I felt like a long-lost son that had one day come home. That's how I felt. It was very natural.
Irwin, the movie, at one time you had audio tapes that were soundtrack of the movie.
Yeah.
I used to have one.
Yeah.
I don't anymore. I lost all my tapes were taken. Is there such a thing as a tape of just the music from that soundtrack, non-duration? Or do you know the tape that comes close to having the same music?
Well, the soundtrack itself is a mix between the music and the narration and the singing. So it's not separate. It's not like it, except if I went back to, say, the 24 tracks, before the mix. But then even the sound there would have to still be mixed, just between the different instruments. So once, but there isn't any tape that, that is readily able to be made. That would just be the music.
When you said that when your first visit to Baba, when you were driving up, he was motioning you to come on in.
Yeah.
When you saw him, he put his hands out to you like that. On the second visit, when you were in that line, and you came up to him, was there a look of recognition, or what was?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that Baba gave us any special acknowledgments. But then again, there was, because on the second visit, when he called us up to stand alongside of him and he said all he did, that was, as much recognition as anyone needs, I guess. That was good. Yeah.
You mentioned 2 visits to see Bob. Is this in the audio, so you could tell by anymore? I don't know how many times you've seen it, but your stories visiting Bob are just very, very interesting.
Well, there was a third visit, of course, at the East-West Gathering. Now, that was really quite spectacular, because the East-West Gathering also occurred at a time where there was an incredible crisis going on in the world. India had just, that is, China had just invaded India. And at the same time, there was a big crisis between Russia and the United States over Cuba, which was known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. And literally, the world was on the brink of terrible devastation. So when the plane took off with all of us aboard to go and see Baba for the East-West Gathering, in which he had planned this gathering for a long time to bring the East and the West together, it was at a time when the world was going to blow each other to pieces. And so when the plane took off, nobody even knew if there'd be a planet left to land on. But you couldn't worry about it. So we're on the way to the Avatar, and the news was frantic at that time. The military on all sides was being put into high gear, and just everything was being revved up for a major confrontation. I mean, there was the fleet had been put around Cuba, and just standing there with the Russian ships coming with their missiles aboard the ship, to deliver to Cuba, and it was going to be something. So when we got to the East-West Gathering, it was just like another world. It was so beautiful, and there was Guruprasad, and it was all decorated, and Baba was welcoming his lovers. Well, the first day of the gathering, these reporters came up to the dais where Baba was sitting, and one of the reporters asked Baba what would happen insofar as India being victorious over the Chinese. And Baba said to the reporter that India would be victorious because the Avatar was in India, but he said, don't forget, I am also in the Chinese. Well, in the paper later, they just printed the first part. They left off the second part about being in the Chinese. But the reporter had also asked Baba, and so far as the crisis between the United States and Russia over Cuba, what will happen? Will there be a third world war? And Baba said, the time for a third world war is not right, and I will avert it. And that was the end of it. Within, I think, days after that, I don't know, we got the news or something that the Russians were turning around, they were taking their ships away, the fleet had been removed. The Chinese, for some mysterious reason that no one ever knew why they even invaded India in the first place, suddenly had turned around and went home. And the whole thing was over with, like nothing ever happened. Everybody went home. That was what happened. This was during that gathering. Now, in 1962. But as far as what was happening at the gathering, that was quite a different thing. Baba's love was really tremendous. And in fact, at one point, when the Australians had come up, Baba said he was going to open up his heart just a little bit so that everybody could feel his intoxication. But he said he couldn't open it too much, otherwise we'd all start dancing and singing and nobody would want to ever do anything again. So, that's what he said.
I was curious what the circumstances were surrounding when you first heard about Barbara, and did you immediately want to see him then, or did it take a few years? How did you hear about him?
Well, I had, my brother Edward had found this book in the library called Listen Humanity, and I had told the story the other day.
Oh, I didn't hear it. I just find that.
That's all right. But briefly, I had, so he found this book, and he called me up to tell me that he had found it. And as a result, I got to know about Baba when I went to New York. And then I read the book, too. And that really put me on fire, and I had to go see Baba after that. It was as a result of that book by Don Stevens. And when I saw Don Stevens later, I met him sometime later, I said, well, Don, you're to blame for me coming to see and meet the Avatar. You see, I blamed him for it. And I said, this is a good blaming. A very good blaming. No, he was happy. He didn't know that. He said, oh, that's great. And we had a very nice meeting. And I interviewed him, too. He had a lot of stories to tell, Don Stevens. Have you ever had him here at the gathering? Yeah. Yeah. He'd be very good. Yeah, you should consider him.
What year was it?
Why do you want to put it in the 80s?
Yeah.
Figure out how the book got in the library?
Well, I think Norina Machabelli at the time may have put in, I know that books were donated to libraries, and this was the main library of New York, and I think it came from her. I don't know, is Adele here? Oh, she is, okay. Yeah.
What master can you do?
You know, that's a good question. Baba never answered that. He never said who. He just made the statement that I was sent to him by another master, but he never elaborated. And at the time, it was really out of place to ask him such a question. It was just the mood of the way things were. Yeah.
I was wondering what your comments are about the importance of working with us and what's out there and kind of the whole sort of
It's a little hard to hear you up here, but can you repeat that?
About Baba's work with the must and the must-born film and the importance of that in the rubric of film and on the consciousness.
Well,
consciousness and seeing musts and so forth.
Yeah, these musts were certainly no ordinary people. Even when you see it on the film, you can tell from the way their behavior is, and the way that they, the statements, the kind of statements they would make from time to time. They're of a very high consciousness. I mean, they can be on any of the planes of consciousness that Baba spoke of. And some of them were of such a high stage that Baba said that for instance, a fifth plane must. If what an ordinary person can just imagine, he said, a must of the fifth plane can actually do it. Whatever, I mean, you can't even imagine what they can do, because our imaginations are also circumscribed and limited to our experience. But he was even saying that what the ordinary person can just imagine in their mind, anything, that the fifth plane master, the fifth plane must, can actually do this thing. And if he were to focus on America, and he wanted to know anything of America, he can know it instantly. And the reason is because he's in the mental sphere and the mind is everywhere. So for him, he does not have to travel. And yet if he wanted to physically be in America, he could physically be there as well, because that too, in that state of mind, the physical form can exist anywhere without having to travel as we know, because the mind is already there.
Or wait, much more personal kind of question.
Yeah.
And then you met Mama when you were about 18?
No, I was about 21 or 22.
You know, and so I'm enslaving myself to the flesh, and so those issues, I mean, the rather on fear, I mean, just what was your take on your reaction? In terms of like celibacy.
Oh, okay. Baba had instructed me to be celibate for a certain length of time, after which I could remain celibate or be married up until May 1967, he said to me. And then, it was the life of celibacy that Baba instructed me to live for that period, and also my brother Edward. Then after that we could get married. Later I did get married, and it was according to whatever he ordered. That was all. As far as me personally is concerned. For everyone, I mean, Baba has given a message in discourse. I should mention this. Dr. Deshmukh received the discourse on marriage and celibacy, and birth control and all like that. And he, you see, Baba didn't really want to give those messages, quite frankly. And Deshmukh told me this. But Deshmukh, being Deshmukh, was so very persistent, and he said, but Baba, so many people are going to want to know about that and what to do and this and that and the other. So Baba said, all right, and he gave the discourse that we all have now. But actually, Baba did not like to be dogmatic and to sort of lay a heavy trip down for everybody. That was not the way he did things. And I think that whatever the discourses are, that people really have to take it in the view of what your capabilities are, what to be somewhat discriminating in your evolutionary level, what your, and how you can find. The spiritual path demands certain things. Baba himself was not so much interested in taking people on the spiritual path. He was not going to make a must out of you. He wasn't going to make, take you into the plains, generally with open eyes, as they say. What he wanted was to take you from where you are to where you should be. And that meant the crossing of all the planes of illusion, of which all these 7 planes are anyhow, except for the 7th, to the plane of reality, where you experience God as God really is. Then there is no more of the illusions as constructed by the mind. He wanted to take you to the real thing. And for that, you require the assistance of the perfect master or the avatar, because there's no way that a person is going to be able to know the entire evolution they've been through up to the present point of how they become a human being, and then all of the things of the planes I mean, that's a big bite. You just, there's no way that the ordinary human intellect is going to deal with that successfully. So Baba said, don't worry about it. Leave it to me. Because his mind, being universal, can see everything. Your past, your present, your future. I mean, he sees the whole picture. And as such, he's quite capable of taking you from where you are to where you should be without you having to worry about everything except just to obey his orders so that you can proceed better. And on this, so this is what I saw. I didn't think that, I felt that these discourses were more for people that are interested in the spiritual path and that are not necessarily completely surrendered to Meher Baba as their master. But it will be very helpful to them, because if they want to follow the disciplines that the path requires, then Baba has chalked it out. But I don't think that people should get really dogmatic and say, oh boy, Baba said this, now how can I be a Baba lover if I don't do it like that? You see, that's not what, no. I don't think that's what he meant at all. But anyhow, each person has to look at it for themselves, and that was the beauty of Baba. He allowed everyone to interpret his messages the way each person felt it. He didn't set any individual up as an authority and say, this is what it means. Now you got to obey it this way. That's not the way he did it.
We were talking earlier about the messages, the channeling, Bob's messages by Narita Machiavelli. You said that's something to say about that.
Oh, yeah. People sometimes say they receive messages from Baba. Now, I must say that I felt that internally I was directed internally to draw closer to God and to get closer to, and eventually it led me to Meherabad. But when you're talking about Baba personally sending a message to somebody for others, that's another story. And for that, I received a letter from Baba in regards to this thing. And I want to see if I can, I hope I marked that part, because this is, speaking of, oh gosh, I don't know if I marked that. You see, what happened was this. My brother one day began to tell me that he felt that he was getting messages from Baba. And the messages that he was getting, and it was not just for him, but for others that were part of the group at the time in Miami, and what we should do, and how we should do things for other people. On the surface, all these messages seemed very loving and, you know, didn't seem to be harmful in any way. So I went along with it for some time, and then one day one of the members of the group said, well, how do we know for sure that Baba is really sending these messages to him? Well, that person decided one good way of finding out is to write to Baba and simply ask him. So it was mentioned to my brother that, you know, the person wanted to write to Baba and ask about the messages. My brother's response at the time was, well, if you do that, then Baba won't acknowledge it, and it'll be denied, and it'll be, you know, like that. I said, well, let's nevertheless see what Baba says, because you can't say that's for sure. Let's just see what he says. You know, if he denies it, then that means there's no message, right? So, okay. So, all right, let me see if I can find this here. I thought I had marked a spot for it, and it was a great part here. You know, bear with me for a little bit. And if I can find it easily, I'll read this part. And I think it's it's right up front. Okay, here it is. Now, okay. All right. We had also written to Baba a letter in which we were wanting to carry out his advice, whatever he would say about any matter. We were always open for that. And but in this letter, he also mentions about and in his letter, one of the reasons I'm reading it is because Baba did say it should be read to everyone. So you're here, now you'll hear it. It starts off, it says, "My dear Irwin and Edwin." This, by the way, was, who was it? Erich had taken the dictation from Baba. Dear Irwin's letter, posted on the 15th instant, was read to beloved Baba. Baba directs me to convey to you both his love and to inform you that it has made him very happy to hear from his dear Irwin's letter that you are eager to carry out any advice from him. Baba said he knows how his dear Irwin and Edward want to love him and want to please him by obeying his wish and advice. Baba wants me to inform you both that he also knows how you long to invoke his grace to grant you God realization. Not bad. Baba says that to draw nearer to God realization, you have to draw further away from pride, deception, obstinacy, and self-assertion to begin with. Love for all at all costs and humility at each step in everyday life is the key that opens the doors to God realization. But then Baba adds, this can only be done as one begins to mature spiritually after many stumblings and hardships. Regarding Baba's advice you seek, he wishes me to inform you to carry out the following. Number one, as you both have decided to come to India for the November gathering, you should seek your father's permission lovingly and also your mother's in spite of your being of age. That's another story. Number two, do not be disrespectful to your father and mother under any provocation, but try to win their love and respect for Baba by your expression of love and respect for them. And this really was a basic theme with Baba, that if anyone was to come to him, it should be done through love and not through any coercion and force or anything of the sort. Only love was the only method that he wanted for people to come to him. Number three, Baba has only one message to give, and that is love God. Now, this is about the messages. I'll start with this again. Number three, Baba has only one message to give, and that is love God. So do not seek various messages through various mediums or channels, nor be deceived into thinking that Baba is sending his messages through any of you. This seeking of so-called messages leads a sincere aspirant astray and grossly endangers his spiritual progress. Baba is telling you all this because he loves you both and because you and the group are dear to him. Baba wants you to read this out to the group or send copies of this letter to those who are away. Baba also wants you to show this letter to your parents. Number five, all that Baba wants from you is pure and simple love for God and your expression of it in anything that you do or encounter. He does not want special rituals or ceremonies from you for the expression of this love. It is not proper to induce Baba's favor, blessing, or presence by means of a set pattern, ritualistic or otherwise. Baba is only concerned directly with the heart, and when the heart is in tune with his love, that is enough. And for the heart to be in tune with his love, it should not seek for special occasions. So to love Baba is a continual remembrance of him in the midst of intense activity of one's everyday life in the world. It always pleases Baba when he finds one who earns his bread with the sweat of his brow, for then he becomes eligible to earn godhood with the blood of his heart. Baba sends his blessing to you both and to those who assemble in his name and love. And Baba says that the only message worth sending and receiving will be his grace of God realization on those fortunate ones who surrender to his wishes and implicitly obey him. Much love to you both, Erich. So, when it would come to taking messages to be given to anyone else in the name of Baba, he said this was this was deception on one's own part, self-deception, and that it could grossly endanger the person's spiritual progress. And he really warned against it. Now,
I was just curious, how did Edwin react to see?
oh, well, we did exactly what Baba said here. We immediately read this out before everyone. I mean, it was it was quite a thing, because this had been going on for some time, you see. But he did it, and he just did it, and then we sent out letters to everybody that we knew that may have heard about it, and that ended it, and that was the end of it.
No more messages came through after?
No, it was finished. Baba's messages, he gave himself. He didn't need us to do it.
And what about your parents, Father?
What?
When your parents saw it.
Oh. Well, my father readily agreed that we should never provoke him. And he said, this is like the Bible. This is the way he accepted it. He said, this is like the Bible. He says, these are all the things that would be in the Bible. And he also, you see, in this, it was prior to the East-West gathering. This was August 24th of 1962. See, there's no one here.
That's the case.
No, so the people are going to help with the dinner bell. No, we just said.
Okay.
So, never mind.
So the outcome.
Let's see, where was I?
5 o'clock.
Is it time over?
No, this just means it's time to remember Bob.
J. Bob.
Oh, Jay Baba. Jay Baba. Yeah. Well, let her finish. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, you said that was another story in itself when Baba made you ask permission from your mother and your father.
Yeah. You see, that was quite a thing. We had enough money in 1962 where we were able to help maybe about 6 or 7 more people to come besides ourselves to the East-West gathering, and we were ready to do it. But as things happened, my dad, somebody told my father that we were planning to do this. And he really got excited, well, now we were back to square one again. And he said, what he did is he wrote a letter to Baba. And in this letter, he said that we were planning to go to see Baba in India like it was some bad thing, And he was saying that we had taken the family's money, and now we were going to help all these, what kind of word did he use for them? I don't know. He had some sort of vagrants or vagabonds or something. I forget everything. To go to see Baba. And he said, we're very bad disciples, and really Baba should leave us in his care for a while, and he would straighten us out, and that there's no way that Baba should allow us to come. So this was part of what he was talking about. In the meantime, Baba's writing here, you should seek your father's permission lovingly and also your mother's in spite of your being of age. Well, you can imagine. He wasn't about to do anything. So, in fact, he was so upset. So so finally, Adi wrote back a letter saying, see, Baba didn't reply to his letter, but Adi did. And then he said, well, in view of the fact that there's so much dissension, why don't you just give your father whatever he asks and then beg of him to lend you whatever amount that it would be for your trip? Well, this was my money. I mean, I had earned it and it was in my bank account. But now, and up to then, there was no way I was going to turn it over to him. But now I get this letter, and I thought, well, it sounds to me that this is from Baba. Baba's just using Adi here. And I'm going to follow it, whatever happens. So I did. I went over to my dad, and I said, Dad, here's this letter which came from Adi, not this one, the one I read, but another one. And my father reads it, and he says, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, Dad, I'm going to give you whatever you want. And he said, you're going to give me whatever I want? And I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And he said, you mean any amount that I say? I said, yeah, if I have it, I'll give it to you. He says, well, we'll see. I said, how much do you want? I mean, we want to go, you know that. He says, yes, yeah, but now what I want is that you should give it all to me. So I said, don't you think I earned anything? He says, that's not the point. This is what I want. Baba said in there that you should give me what I want. This is what I want. So I said, well, okay. And when I said okay, he says, it's a trick. He couldn't believe it, that this was for real. He said, it's a trick. So I said, no trick, just, I'll do it. He says, no, it's a trick. I didn't know what to do. So I said, what do you want me to do? He says, we'll see. He says, I'll go to the bank. I'll get the bank to give me a slip. You'll sign it. It'll transfer everything over to my account, and then we'll see if you really do that. I said, all right, do whatever you want. So he did. The next day he comes with this paper, and, and I signed it. So as soon as I signed it, he looked at me, and he was very happy. And he goes over to his chair, and he sits down, and he picks up the paper, and he looks like the cat that just swallowed the canary completely. These fellows are not going anywhere. So then I went over to him and I said, well, now, Dad, I did my part. It also said in the letter that you should now lend me whatever amount that just Edwin and I needed in order to go. So he says, oh, well, I'll think about it. I said, well, there's no time to think about it. The flight is leaving in, it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And I said, I really have to make the arrangements because we have to put up our deposit and this and that, money and pay for the tickets. That is not a deposit, but to pay for it. We already had a deposit. So he says, well, now, don't press me, because if you press me, I'm not going to do anything. And besides, you didn't do everything that Baba said. I said, I didn't? What's left? He said, Baba said in the letter that you should beg of me, and you didn't do that. And I could just picture it in my mind. So I said, well, Dad, I just couldn't get to that point. So I said, well, Dad, all right, I beg of you. I just said it, I beg of you that you should do this. It was so humiliating to me to have to do this because I was not one that put money in that kind of a category. But, to get to Baba, I had to do it. So he said, well, now I'll think about it. I said, well, Dad, you just said that. No, I really... and he wouldn't budge. So I thought, well, all right, Dad, if you don't want to do it, just say so, and I'll see if I can make other arrangements. So he said, oh, other arrangements. What arrangements? I said, I'm going to New York, and I'll just see what I can do to make arrangements there. He says, well, sure, go ahead. And, you know, he just couldn't imagine it. So I went to New York, and but before I left for New York, he said something very interesting. He says, you know, you're going to figure out a way to do it anyhow. It was like a sort of a thing that popped out of him. Because for me to still want to go to New York when we were now really flat out, the only money I had left was $300 on deposit, which was on this group flight that Harry Kenmore in those days was having to go to the East-West gathering. And I even asked him, I said, I have this $300, you're entitled to it. He says, no, you can have that. It wasn't. That was as much as I had. So he was being generous about that. But it was nowhere near what you needed to go. You couldn't go anywhere in that, not for the two of us. So I went to New York, and I go into American Express, and I remember I had a American Express card, which I had never used. And I thought, they'll never give me any tickets on this, but you know, I heard about this fly now, pay later type of thing. So I go in there, and I asked, you know, I give them the card, and I said, I would like a book a passage to India. So she says, oh, well, I'll have to call up the credit department, and they'll have to okay it. So I said, all right. Now, how many?
You have somewhere else to go.
I have to leave. All right, I'll try and make this real fast. So she does, and she allows for one ticket. It approves. So I said, we'll make it 2. So she says, I'll have to call again. And wouldn't do it for 2, only for 1. Now, I had a friend, Phil Callens, who had been given an instruction by Baba to come and see him for the East-West gathering. But this fellow was always as poor as a piper, and he never had any money for anything. And so I called him up, and I said, Phil, I got this one ticket. Neither Edwin or I can use it because I can't get any more tickets. I have no credit, and, you know, nothing's working out. So you can take this ticket. And he says, but I'm not worthy. I can't take it. I said, the avatar said you're worthy. You're worthy. You go. He invited you. You don't question whether you're worthy. You just take it and go. And he says, all right, you put it that way, I'll go. So now we had no ticket at all. He had the only one there was. And then just then a letter comes, a cable comes, I'm going to make this fast now, from Baba to, Harry Kenmore calls me up, a very successful chiropractor in New York. He calls me up and he says, Irwin, I have good news for you. This is after, down to the last second already. I have good news for you. I said, what's the good news? He says, Baba just sent me a telegram ordering me to give you the money and Edward the money to make the trip to see Baba and also all your expenses. So I said, that's good news. And with that, and he was a very dynamic guy. He just said, when do you want it? I said, well, whenever it's convenient tomorrow. Yeah, so the next day I came and he had me read the cable to him because he was blind. I read it to him and he made all the arrangements and did everything, gave us whatever we needed, and we were off. Jai Baba.